What started as a rap feud has now turned into a full-blown family war, and this time, it is not staying on Instagram. 50 Cent and T.I. have been taking shots for years, but now the tension has spilled into wives, sons, old grudges, and a new threat that has the entire internet on edge. Because when 50 started hinting at exposing old controversies and King Harris jumped into the middle of the chaos, this stopped looking like a normal hip-hop back and forth and started feeling like something much bigger. And that is exactly why people cannot stop watching. This is no longer just about a versus battle that never happened. It is no longer just about slick comments, diss records, or trolling memes. This is about pride, legacy, family loyalty, public humiliation, and the kind of pressure that can crack everything wide open. T.I. says he was defending his family. 50 Cent is moving like a man who knows he does not need a diss track to shake the room. And King Harris, already surrounded by controversy of his own, has now found himself right in the center of a fight that may be way bigger than he expected. But here is where this gets even crazier. The deeper you look into this feud, the messier it gets. Old tension, public disrespect, family members stepping in, threats of bigger exposure, and suddenly what looked like entertainment starts raising a darker question. Is this still rap beef? Or is this turning into something that could seriously damage everyone involved? Because once family enters the war, the rules change. And if 50 Cent really decides to take this fight beyond social media, then T.I., Tiny, and King Harris may be dealing with consequences that hit a lot harder than a few viral posts. To understand why this situation feels so explosive right now, you have to go back to the tension that never really disappeared in the first place. Because this did not begin with one Instagram post, one interview, or one angry response from King Harris. This feud has been simmering for years, quietly building under the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode again. And when it did, it pulled in way more than just two rappers. At the center of it all are two men who have always moved very differently. On one side, T.I., the self-proclaimed king of the South, a rapper whose legacy was built on lyricism, Atlanta influence, and turning personal struggle into a comeback story. On the other side of 50 Cent, a master of pressure, mockery, and public humiliation, a man who has proven again and again that he does not always need a song to win a war. Sometimes all he needs is one post, one caption, one image, and the internet does the rest for him. That difference in style is exactly what makes this clash feel so dangerous. Because when T.I. goes at somebody, he usually wants to stand in the booth, throw bars, make his case, and defend his name directly. But when 50 Cent decides to make someone uncomfortable, he often attacks from a completely different angle. He turns the feud into a spectacle. He drags it into social media. He plays with timing. He lets the embarrassment spread. And before the other side even realizes what happened, the narrative is already slipping out of their hands. That is why this feud has people paying attention in a totally different way. A lot of people trace the current version of this drama back to the versus conversation. What was supposed to be a celebration of catalogs, hits, and hip-hop legacy slowly turned into a public sore spot. Ty made it sound like there had been real discussion behind the scenes, real movement, real interest. But once the conversation became public, things seemed to shift. And from T.I.'s point of view, that looked like disrespect. It looked like someone saying one thing privately and another thing publicly. For a rapper whose image has always been tied to pride, stature, and standing tall, that kind of move was never going to sit right. And once that irritation came back to the surface, it reopened old wounds that were already there. Because this is not some random new rap rivalry, this is tension with history. There have been slick comments, indirect shots, and years of people wondering whether the two men genuinely respected each other or were just keeping things civil enough to avoid a full explosion. The truth is, the energy between them has felt uneasy for a long time. The versus issue simply gave that energy a fresh reason to boil over again. But what made this version of the feud hit harder was not just the old history. It was the fact that family got dragged into it. And once that happened, the atmosphere changed immediately. Because now this was no longer just T.I. versus 50 Cent. Now this was about Tiny. Now this was about the Harris name. Now this was about sons jumping in, loyalty being tested in public, and every response carrying more emotional weight than before. Once a wife gets mocked, once a mother becomes part of the joke, once children start reacting, the entire thing stops feeling like ordinary rap drama and starts feeling personal in a much uglier way. That is where King Harris enters the picture. And that is where this story becomes even more unpredictable. King Harris is not just some outsider trying to attach himself to a famous feud. He is T.I. and Tiny's son, and that matters because he grew up under a spotlight most people could never handle. From a very young age, he was visible. The public watched him as a child on reality television. They watched him joke, move around his family, speak with confidence, and develop the kind of personality that instantly got attention. He stood out, he had charisma, he had energy. He had the kind of boldness that makes people either love you instantly or keep watching because they know you are going to say something wild. But growing up in public can twist that boldness into something else. And that seems to be exactly what happened here. The same energy that once made King look funny, fearless, and unforgettable started turning sharper as he got older. Suddenly, the clips going viral were not sweet family moments. They were arguments, confrontations, Instagram lives, angry exchanges. Public moments where it felt like King was trying to prove something, not just to strangers online, but to the whole world. That pressure matters. Because when you are the son of someone as famous as T.I., people do not just see you as yourself. They compare you constantly. They measure your every move against your father's legacy. They question whether you earned anything. They assume your life has been easy. They reduce you to a celebrity kid before you even get the chance to define yourself. For some people, that kind of pressure creates discipline. For others, it creates rebellion. And with King Harris, rebellion became part of the image. Over time, it started to feel like he was determined to show that he was not soft, not sheltered, not protected by privilege, even though the public could clearly see the life he came from. That contradiction became one of the biggest reasons people stayed obsessed with his story. Viewers kept asking the same question over and over again. Why does someone born into that level of access and comfort seem so determined to move in the opposite direction? And the more public his behavior became, the harder that question hit. There were viral incidents, heated exchanges, moments that looked less like harmless immaturity and more like a pattern slowly forming in real time. Each clip added to the same growing narrative. King Harris was not just being watched anymore, he was becoming controversial. And the worst part is, the warning signs were never hidden. They were right there in public. That is what makes T.I.'s role in this story so important. Because unlike the fans, the blogs, or the people reacting in comment sections, T.I. was not looking at King from a distance. He was looking at him with the terrifying recognition of someone who had seen this movie before and knew exactly how it could end. T.I. has his own history with the legal system. He knows what it feels like when bad decisions become public records. He knows what it costs when ego, image, and recklessness start making choices for you. So when he looked at his son and warned that the road he was on could end badly, those were not empty words. That was not performance. That was experience talking. And that is why the public keeps circling back to one painful idea. Maybe the father saw the collapse coming before anyone else did. Because King was not only trying to become an artist, he was also trying to build an identity separate from his father's shadow. He pursued music, built a presence, and tried to carve out his own path. But the problem was that every time he seemed ready to be taken seriously for his music, some new controversy rushed in and swallowed the conversation whole. Instead of headlines about growth, the public saw tension. Instead of momentum, they saw distraction. Instead of a clean artistic rise, they saw a young man getting pulled deeper into image wars, public arguments, and real-life consequences. And that is where the current feud becomes so explosive. Because King did not jump into this battle as a clean slate. He jumped in carrying baggage. Public baggage, personal baggage, family baggage. The kind of baggage that makes every move heavier. So when he stepped into a conflict with someone like 50 Cent, it did not feel like a simple act of loyalty. It felt like a risky decision made by somebody already standing too close to the edge. Meanwhile, T.I. was trying to fight on multiple fronts at once. He was defending his own name, defending his wife, managing public pressure, responding to trolling, handling questions about old controversies, and at the same time, watching his son get pulled deeper into a situation that was already spinning out of control. That is what gives this story its real tension. It is not just one feud, it is layered pressure. A father with a public legacy, a son with a public pattern, a family under scrutiny, and an opponent who knows exactly how to weaponize attention. Then comes the final piece that makes everything feel even more unstable. 50 Cent is not being talked about here like just another rapper in a back and forth. The reason people are so locked in is because he has built a reputation for turning conflict into content and content into pressure. When someone like that starts hinting that the feud could move beyond music and memes into something bigger, the whole room changes. Suddenly, people are no longer just asking who won the exchange. Yeah, they are asking what the next move could do to the Harris family's image, their stress level, and their already fragile public standing. And with King Harris sitting right in the middle of all this, the story gets even more volatile. Because now he is not just the son of famous parents. He is not just a young artist trying to prove himself. He is not just a loud voice defending his mother. He is a symbol of how fast celebrity family tension can spiral when ego, history, loyalty, and public humiliation all collide at once. This is why the internet cannot look away. A failed battle turned into personal resentment. Personal resentment turned into family disrespect. Family disrespect pulled in a son already surrounded by controversy. And now that son is stuck in the middle of a fight that may be a lot bigger than a few diss tracks and a few viral captions. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes that this story was never going to stay small. Because once old pride gets reopened, once public disrespect enters the picture, and once family loyalty starts driving the responses, something always breaks. The only question now is what breaks first. The moment everything truly spiraled wasn't when the old tension resurfaced. It wasn't even when the memes started flying across Instagram. The real turning point came when the feud stopped being about two rap legends and suddenly pulled the next generation directly into the fire. And that next generation had a name everyone already recognized. King Harris. For years, people had watched him grow up under cameras, watched him joke with his siblings, watched him show flashes of charisma that made it seem like he might eventually follow his father into the music world in a completely positive way. But by the time this feud reignited, the public version of King Harris had already started to shift. Instead of being remembered as the funny kid from reality television, he was becoming known for viral confrontations, heated livestream arguments, and moments where his temper seemed to explode right in front of the internet. So when the tension between his father and 50 Cent started heating up again, many people wondered whether King would stay quiet or jump into the chaos. He didn't stay quiet. The spark that pulled him in came when posts targeting his family began circulating online. Yet what started as trolling quickly crossed into territory that felt personal. Images, captions, and comments referencing his mother began spreading. In the world of rap beef, insults are normal. But once family members become the focus, emotions change instantly. Loyalty takes over. Pride takes over. And rational thinking often disappears. King reacted the way many sons might react when they feel their mother has been disrespected. He fired back. But the way he fired back made the entire internet stop and stare. Instead of simply defending his parents or mocking the other side, King escalated the situation in a way that shocked even people used to brutal hip-hop beefs. He posted messages that directly referenced deeply personal aspects of 50 Cent's past, including the painful history surrounding his late mother. That moment changed everything. Within minutes, screenshots began circulating across every major social platform. Some users were stunned that someone so young would go that far in a public feud. Others defended him, arguing that once someone insults your mother, all rules go out the window. But regardless of which side people supported, everyone agreed on one thing. The line had officially been crossed. The situation escalated even further when King decided not to keep the response limited to social media. He brought it into his music. A new track appeared online, and the visual imagery connected to it only intensified the controversy. Suddenly, the feud wasn't just words anymore, it was content. Visuals, statements, and reactions all stacking on top of each other. And once those images began circulating, the conversation exploded. Fans debated whether King had gone too far. Critics accused him of turning a rap feud into something unnecessarily ugly. Supporters argued he was defending his family exactly the way a son should. But the reaction that mattered most came from someone much closer to him: his father. Ty had spent years navigating rap conflicts himself, but even he seemed uncomfortable with how far things had gone. In interviews afterward, he made it clear that he did not want his children deeply involved in the feud. He understood loyalty. He respected defending family. But bringing someone's deceased parent into the argument crossed into territory he believed was unnecessary. By the time he said that publicly, however, the moment had already gone viral. Screenshots were everywhere, videos were everywhere, and the narrative had shifted once again. Yet what started as an old rivalry between two rappers had suddenly turned into a generational confrontation. Fans weren't just watching T.I. and 50 Cent anymore. They were watching fathers, sons, reputations, and decades of unresolved tension collide in real time. But here's the twist that made the entire situation even more complicated. While all of this drama was exploding online, King Harris wasn't just dealing with rap beef. He was dealing with real-life consequences at the same time. Long before this feud reignited, his name had already appeared in headlines connected to various public incidents and legal issues. Videos of confrontations had circulated, reports of traffic violations and court appearances had surfaced. And critics had begun building a narrative that the young rapper was drifting into the same kind of trouble his father had once faced decades earlier. That pattern started with small incidents that people brushed off as youthful mistakes. A viral argument at a restaurant, heated exchanges during live streams, public disagreements with his parents that fans watched unfold in real time. But the timeline didn't stop there. In 2022, King Harris was involved in a widely discussed legal situation connected to driving violations, including speeding and driving with a suspended license. That case later became more complicated when a failure to appear in court resulted in a bench warrant. At the time, many people assumed the situation would quietly resolve itself, but the story didn't disappear. In October 2024, everything resurfaced in dramatic fashion. During a traffic stop in Georgia, police reported that King Harris nearly collided with a patrol vehicle while pulling out of a gas station. When officers approached the car, they claimed to smell marijuana coming from inside the vehicle. During the stop, officers also reported discovering a firearm on King's hip. Once his identification was checked, authorities realized there was already an active warrant connected to the earlier case. The arrest followed shortly after. Body cam footage from the encounter later circulated online, showing King cooperating with officers as they removed the firearm and placed him in handcuffs. According to the report, he remained calm and compliant during the arrest, but the internet didn't focus on that part. Instead, the footage became another viral moment attached to his name. Comment sections exploded again. Critics said the arrest confirmed the troubling pattern people had been warning about for years. Supporters argued he was being judged far too harshly simply because of who his father was. And right in the middle of all that noise, another twist appeared that made the situation even more complicated. King Harris had just become a father himself. His son was born in November 2024, only weeks after the arrest incident. Around the same time, he released a song dedicated to his newborn child, trying to show a more reflective side of himself. For some fans, that moment felt hopeful. Maybe fatherhood would change him. Maybe responsibility would force him to slow down. Maybe the chaos would finally settle. But the reality was far more complicated. Because now King Harris wasn't just navigating personal mistakes and public scrutiny. He was also caught inside one of the most high-profile feuds in hip-hop, one that involved decades of history, massive egos, and an opponent who understood exactly how to keep the spotlight burning. And just when people thought the feud had reached its peak, another bombshell appeared. A rumor began spreading that 50 Cent was considering taking the conflict far beyond social media posts and diss tracks. Instead of responding with music, he might respond with something much more damaging: a documentary. And if that project actually moves forward, it could drag years of past controversies, allegations, and old legal battles back into the public conversation. Which means the Harris family could soon find themselves facing a completely different kind of war. One fought not through songs, but through headlines, streaming platforms, and public opinion. And that possibility is exactly why the internet is watching so closely right now. Because if this feud truly moves in that direction, the consequences could be far bigger than anyone expected. And the person caught right in the middle of it all is still King Harris. Just when people thought the situation between the two camps had already reached its breaking point, the drama took another turn that nobody expected. Because while most rap feuds eventually cool down after a few diss tracks or a few weeks of social media trolling, this one began moving into a completely different territory. And the reason for that shift had everything to do with how 50 Cent fights his battles. Unlike many artists who prefer to answer with music, 50 Cent has built a reputation for turning personal conflicts into public spectacles. Instead of rushing into the recording booth, he often uses something far more powerful in today's media landscape: attention. He knows how to trigger headlines, provoke reactions, and keep the internet talking long after the initial insult has faded. That strategy is exactly what made the next development so shocking. Not long after the feud reignited online, 50 Cent hinted that the conflict might extend beyond rap entirely. In a post that spread quickly across social media, he teased the idea of a documentary-style project that would explore old controversies connected to T.I. and his wife Tameka "Tiny" Harris. And the message was short, but the implication was massive. Suddenly, the feud wasn't just about ego or bragging rights anymore. Now people were asking whether this fight might spill into a different arena altogether. One involving storytelling, media production, and the ability to frame old narratives in a way that could reignite debates the Harris family thought were already behind them. And that is exactly what made the internet erupt. Fans immediately began speculating about what such a project might contain. Comment sections filled with arguments about whether the idea was simply another trolling tactic or something much more serious. Some people believed it was nothing more than a clever way to keep the feud trending. Others believed it was a calculated move designed to apply pressure on the Harris family from an entirely new direction. Either way, the possibility alone was enough to send the story into overdrive. Because when you combine a long-running rap feud with a media figure who understands how to control narratives, the stakes become much higher than a typical exchange of insults. The conversation shifts from who won the argument to what happens if this turns into a full public investigation of someone's past. And that question is exactly what kept the internet buzzing. Meanwhile, T.I. made it clear he wasn't intimidated by the idea. In interviews and new music, he responded by challenging 50 Cent directly, suggesting that if the conflict needed to move into different arenas, music, conversation, or even documentary storytelling, he was prepared to face it head-on. For T.I., the situation had already crossed into personal territory. From his perspective, the feud was no longer just about pride or competition. It was about defending his family's name. In one interview, he explained that he had no interest in unnecessary drama, but felt he couldn't stay silent when his loved ones were being dragged into the conversation. That response only added more fuel to the fire. Because the more both sides spoke about the situation, the clearer it became that neither one wanted to back down. And the longer the tension lasted, the more people started noticing something else happening in the background. The feud was evolving. At first, it had been about two rappers revisiting old disagreements. Then it became about families defending themselves online. Now it was starting to look like a clash between two very different types of influence: music versus media. And sitting right in the middle of that storm was King Harris. For him, the situation was far more complicated than a simple rap rivalry. He was already dealing with the aftermath of his own controversies and legal issues, And now he had found himself entangled in a conflict involving two of the most outspoken figures in hip-hop. That position created enormous pressure. On one side was loyalty to his parents and the instinct to defend them when they were attacked publicly. On the other side was the reality that jumping into a feud with someone as experienced as 50 Cent could quickly escalate beyond anything he might be able to control. The internet could see that tension clearly. Some fans supported King, praising him for standing up for his mother when she became part of the argument. Others warned that engaging with someone known for relentless trolling and media strategy might only make things worse. But regardless of where people stood, everyone agreed on one thing. This was no longer just a rap feud. It had become a public spectacle involving legacy, reputation, and the unpredictable power of the internet. And as the drama continued to unfold, one question began dominating every discussion thread, podcast debate, and YouTube breakdown about the situation. Would this conflict eventually fade away like so many rap beefs before it? Or was it about to explode into something much bigger? Something that could reshape the public image of the Harris family for years to come? Because if the rumored project ever becomes reality, the feud will move far beyond memes and diss tracks. It will enter a space where storytelling, media narratives, and public opinion collide. And once that happens, the consequences won't just affect the two rappers at the center of the argument. They will affect everyone connected to them, especially the son who stepped into the battle trying to defend his family, and now finds himself standing directly in the middle of a war that shows no sign of slowing down. Once the feud reached this level, the internet did what it always does when two powerful names collide. It exploded. Within hours of the posts, interviews, and rumors about a possible documentary spreading online, hip-hop blogs, YouTube commentators, and social media users began dissecting every part of the situation. Old interviews were resurfacing, clips from podcasts were circulating again, screenshots of Instagram posts were being shared thousands of times. And suddenly, the conversation was everywhere. Some fans immediately took the side of T.I., arguing that he was simply defending his family from disrespect. They pointed out that once someone drags your wife into a public feud, responding becomes almost unavoidable. In hip-hop culture, protecting your family's name is seen by many as a matter of principle. Others, however, saw things very differently. Supporters of 50 Cent argued that the entire situation was another example of 50 doing what he has always done best, controlling the narrative. They pointed out that he didn't need to release a diss track or engage in long arguments. A few well-timed posts were enough to keep the conversation trending for days. That contrast became one of the most fascinating aspects of the feud. On one side was T.I. responding through music and interviews, him speaking directly about defending his family. On the other side was 50 Cent, mostly sitting back, dropping a meme or a caption here and there, letting the internet amplify the drama. The difference in strategy made the entire situation feel like a chess match, and the public couldn't stop analyzing every move. Hip-hop commentators began debating the situation on podcasts and live streams. Some argued that the feud had gone too far once family members became involved. Others insisted that rap beef has always been brutal, and that this was simply another chapter in a long tradition of confrontational hip-hop culture. But one person kept appearing in almost every conversation: King Harris. For many observers, he had become the most unpredictable part of the entire situation. Some fans admired his loyalty. He's saying it showed that he wasn't afraid to stand up for his mother and defend his family publicly. Others worried that jumping into such a high-profile feud might only add more pressure to a life that already seemed full of scrutiny. Because while the internet was busy debating the feud, King Harris was still dealing with the consequences of his own controversies and legal challenges. That reality made the entire situation feel more complicated. Instead of being a simple supporter of his father in a rap battle, King had become a symbol of a much larger conversation about growing up famous. Many people began discussing the pressure that children of celebrities face when they try to build identities separate from their parents. Every decision becomes public. Every mistake becomes a headline. Every emotional reaction becomes a viral clip. And for King Harris, those pressures were now colliding with a feud involving two of the most recognizable names in hip-hop. Even within the industry, reactions were mixed. Some artists and commentators quietly supported T.I., emphasizing that defending family is something most people understand instinctively. Others felt that the situation was being escalated unnecessarily and that the feud had already reached a point where nobody would truly win. Because once conflicts move beyond music and into personal territory, reputations can be affected in ways that last much longer than a viral moment. Meanwhile, social media users began creating their own narratives about the feud. Some framed it as a clash between two generations of hip-hop icons. Others described it as an example of how the internet has changed the nature of rap conflicts entirely. In the past, rivalries played out through songs and live performances. Today, they unfold through screenshots, live streams, memes, and comment sections. And in that environment, every moment becomes part of the story. The speculation surrounding the rumored documentary only added more fuel to the fire. Even though no official release date had been confirmed, the mere suggestion that such a project might exist caused people to revisit older headlines and debates. That alone kept the conversation trending for days. At the same time, the Harris family's name continued appearing in discussions about legacy and reputation. For many fans, ITTI's career had long been associated with resilience, the story of an artist who faced serious legal trouble early in his life, but eventually rebuilt his image and achieved success again. Now, people were wondering whether his son might eventually experience a similar journey. Some believed that King Harris still had time to change the narrative surrounding his name. Others feared that the combination of public controversies and high-profile feuds could make that path much more difficult. That tension between hope and skepticism became one of the defining themes of the public reaction. Because beneath all the memes, debates, and dramatic headlines, the story also raised a deeper question. What happens when a young person grows up under constant public observation while trying to define who they really are? For King Harris, that question remains unanswered. And as the feud continues evolving, the spotlight on the Harris family has only grown brighter. Fans, critics, and commentators are all watching closely, waiting to see whether the situation will calm down or whether another unexpected twist is still coming. Because if there is one thing everyone has learned from this entire saga, it's that the story is far from over. Just when it seemed like the feud had already reached its peak, another realization began spreading across the internet that made the entire situation feel even heavier. Because this story isn't just about two rap legends trading insults anymore. It's about legacy, and whether that legacy is about to repeat itself. When people started looking deeper into the timeline, they began noticing something unsettling. The history between T.I. One and the legal system looked strangely similar to the pattern that seemed to be forming around his son. Years ago, T.Y. himself was caught in a cycle of mistakes, arrests, and public controversies. At one point, it seemed like his career might collapse completely. Federal weapons charges, probation violations, prison time. His name dominated headlines for all the wrong reasons. But what made his story remarkable was the comeback. After serving his time, T.I. rebuilt his image step by step. He released music that dominated charts. He expanded into television and business. Slowly, the narrative changed from troubled rapper to successful survivor. That redemption arc became part of his legend. Now, decades later, people are watching his son face a moment that feels eerily similar to the beginning of that same story. But here's the part that makes the situation feel even more dramatic. Unlike his father, King Harris is growing up during the era of social media. Every mistake is recorded. Every argument becomes a viral clip. Every confrontation is replayed thousands of times by strangers who have never met him. In the past, artists could make mistakes quietly and rebuild themselves later. Today, the internet preserves everything, and that means the pressure surrounding King Harris is unlike anything his father faced when he was young. At the same time, the feud with 50 Cent has pushed the Harris family into an even brighter spotlight. Because 50 Cent doesn't just fight rap battles, he creates moments. Moments that people talk about for weeks. Moments that dominate headlines. moments that force everyone involved to react. Right now, the entire situation feels like one of those moments. The rumors about a documentary have not been confirmed. The feud has not officially ended. The legal issues surrounding King Harris are still part of the conversation, and none of the people involved seem ready to walk away. That uncertainty is exactly what has fans glued to the story. Some believe this entire conflict will eventually cool down like most rap beefs do. Others believe the tension has already gone too far for things to return to normal. Because once families get involved, once reputations are on the line, and once the internet begins dissecting every move, the pressure becomes impossible to ignore. For King Harris, that pressure is now part of everyday life. He is no longer just the son of two famous parents. He is a public figure with his own controversies and his own music career, and his own decisions shaping the narrative surrounding his name. And right now, that narrative sits at a crossroads. One path leads toward growth, learning from mistakes, proving critics wrong, building a career that eventually stands apart from the chaos. The other path leads somewhere far darker. More headlines, more controversy, more moments that push his name further into the wrong kind of spotlight. Which path he chooses is something nobody can predict. But one thing is certain, the next chapter of this story will not happen quietly. Because the moment the feud between T.I. and 50 Cent spilled into their families, the situation stopped being a simple rap rivalry. It became something much bigger, a story about fathers and sons, about pride and reputation, about what happens when public pressure collides with personal choices. And right now, the entire hip-hop world is watching to see how it ends. Because if this situation keeps escalating the way it has been, the next headline could be even bigger than the last. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think King Harris made the right decision stepping into the feud to defend his family? Or do you think that move only made the situation worse? And another question people across the internet keep debating. If this conflict between T.I. and 50 Cent continues to escalate, who do you think actually has the advantage? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story is still unfolding, and new developments could appear at any moment. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep dives into hip-hop drama, celebrity conflicts, and the stories behind the headlines, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss the next update. Because in the world of rap beefs, the biggest twist usually comes when everyone thinks the story is already over.